think most everybody or most people that are here have been to these X-Culture research meetings. We took a little break over the summer, which I thought was appropriate, but we're getting back into speed with it. So this is the next meeting in a series. This is on qualitative research. There have been a lot of us that are interested in qualitative research, and Daria Panina has graciously volunteered to lead a discussion on that with the support of Vaz, who can talk about the data and the that's available, a tremendous amount. Actually, this data set with X-Culture is amazing, really. It's just a matter of one's creativity of how they can break it down and dive into it. So it's a researcher's dream in a lot of ways. So with that, Daria, I'm going to turn it over to you to lead the initial discussion, and we'll take it from there.
All right, so good morning, everyone, and good afternoon to some of you. So my name is Daria. If we haven't met, I am a professor of management in Mays Business School, Texas A&M University, and I am working with X-Culture since 2013. So very much enjoying being part of the project. And when Vas a few months ago sent an email asking for people who are interested in qualitative research, my hand went up right away because me and qualitative research, we go way back. So I feel very passionate about it. I know it's not the easiest thing to do. It's time consuming, it's labor intensive, it's sometimes difficult to publish. But on the kind of positive side, obviously, it's incredibly interesting, and there are some very interesting opportunities in qualitative studies that you cannot find in normal quantitative research. And I suppose all of you here, to a certain extent, are doing a little bit of qualitative research, or at least are thinking about qualitative research. So I do not actually have to explain to you all the benefits of it. So I think I will just say a few things about my experience with qualitative studies. And then the plan really is to move to discussion of X-Culture qualitative data. And we really would like to open the floor for a discussion. We hope to kind of have some clarity about the number of people who are interested in qualitative research, whether you are doing something with X-Culture data already, and just to try to coordinate these efforts and see if we can kind of move forward qualitative research in X-Culture. So I started doing qualitative research in the 90s. So it's like, what, 30 years ago? And at the time, I was undergraduate student in economics in Moscow State University in Russia. And if you know your history, 90s in Russia was the time of serious economic reforms. After the political crisis, economic crisis, Russian government decided to pursue reforms towards market economy. And World Bank was kind of helping in this effort. And as a part of the World Bank, Harvard advisory group was hired by Russian government to actually help with the reforms. And I was actually lucky enough to be in the right place at the right time. They hired me as a translator, and then very quickly figured that I understand accounting, I know economics, and I can speak English. So it was kind of like a very unusual thing at the time in Russia. So they actually hired me eventually as their researcher. So I was responsible for collecting all the data on Russian privatization. So literally for 5 years, first alone, then with a group of researchers, I was traveling to different regions of the country. Every week, 2 or 3 days, I would interview senior executives of privatizing companies. And that, I would say, was the most profound experience in my professional life. So after I did that, I applied to graduate school, pursued my PhD. And I would say that in these 5 years, I learned about economies in transition, how to run a business, human psychology, and a lot of other things, more than I ever learned from any other books, research papers, and so on. So after that, I really kind of always felt very passionate about qualitative research. I haven't done much yet because, again, it's difficult sometimes to do, especially if you are an assistant professor and there is this kind of need to publish and be productive, and then qualitative research usually takes some time. But now I think we are standing at this point when we actually can make it happen. And we have X Culture, and X Culture actually has enormous amounts of qualitative data already collected. So all we need is analyze it. We have technology that helps us along. And I also have to say that in terms of publishing, it looks like multi-method studies and everything that's been done so far actually move the needle a little bit forward. So in the past, quite a few editors and reviewers were not actually very familiar with qualitative research. And then there were a lot of questions there, but now I think it's more acceptable. So I really feel like with X Culture data, we can contribute a lot by bringing qualitative research into the mix. You can consider just purely qualitative papers, or you can add qualitative component to already ongoing quantitative study, which I think will make the paper richer. So with this in mind, I think it will be best if we will now move to looking at what's available, and then we can actually open it up for discussion. Vas?
Okay, so I will share my screen then and show you some of the work that has already been done. And as Daria said, one, it looks like there is room, or there is enough data for multiple studies here. And to be honest, we've had a number of researchers step forward over the years, and with the goal of conducting some qualitative research. But so far, we've had only, I believe, one study published. I was involved in that one. There could have been maybe another one that I cannot recall right away, but could have been maybe two. But so the output hasn't been quite as good as we expected. So it seems like there is room for much, much more work in this area. So I will show you what kind of data we have in general, as well as provide a quick overview of the ideas we've considered in the past for papers. But I'm sure there are many more possibilities. And so hopefully, maybe even at the end of this meeting, we will have some additional, I don't know, teams formed or people who sign up, so that we have more output on this front. So first, sort of in general terms, the kind of comments that we get, qualitative comments that we get, and all of you have participated in Next Culture, so you kind of know how it works. But so at the end of each week, we ask the students to describe in their own words how the things are going for their team. And so some of them provide very detailed comments, some provide no comments, and some say things like, everything's good, that's the comment. But again, quite a few of them write extensively and at least provide a few sentences, sometimes even a few pages, depending on how the things are going. Then there is a more detailed review at the very end, same thing. So tell us how the things were going for the whole project. And so this is something that is relatively easy sort of to work with. Now, we also have the actual reports. So whatever students submit at the end of the semester. And so technically these are qualitative documents or data. And so we have never analyzed the reports themselves other than evaluate them for quality. So basically the grade, the grade for the actual, economic viability or things like that. But as far as the content, the language they use, it's never been used for qualitative studies of that kind. We also have, and this one would be a little bit more difficult to work with. So there is obviously correspondence among the team members, but we do not collect those sort of by default. So the teams, as you know, can choose any mode of communication. And some of them use email, others use, I don't know, Skype, Zoom, Google Docs, whatever they use for communication. And so since it's not a centralized platform, it's very difficult for us to collect all of those comments. But we do get some of them. Some teams submit literally logs of their communications. So we have some that we've accumulated over the years. And moving forward, if any of the studies requires the actual correspondence, we should be able to maybe collect it in the future. Maybe have a group of teams that volunteer to log all of their correspondence and things like that. We also have qualitative comments on the performance of the team members. So when we do the peer evaluations in the weekly rounds, it only contains the numeric evaluations on a 1 to 5 point scale along multiple dimensions. But the final set, the post project, so those ask to comment on each team member's performance. And so again, here some students just say a few words like, John did a great job, but some actually provide a pretty detailed account, of what went wrong maybe with John or, whatever they feel needs to be said there. Again, those to my knowledge have never been analyzed other than some professors look at them when, for example, the numeric grade is low, so they want to know what exactly went wrong. So, but otherwise, otherwise it hasn't been used for research per se. So, and let me show you what the files look like. Again, they may look a little overwhelming first, but it's not because they're poorly organized. It's just because it's a lot of sort of information to work with. So we have two main files. One is the code book and one is the actual data file. And so the code book looks very simple. So essentially it contains, tells us what kind of comments we have. And so here, when you look at the variable names, you will see that you have this comment at 10, 11, 2. So that's essentially comments left at the end of survey 3, 4, 5, 6, essentially, week 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on and so on. And so here, if you scroll a little bit to the right, you can also see how many of those comments were left semester by semester. I don't see here the data a little bit further, maybe just hidden here. Yeah, so it's a little, hidden, but yeah, so all of those comments were, available week by week. You will see that there is some difference, like, you have commentants at 6 and experience at 6. The reason for that is that the question itself changed from semester to semester. And so we just put it as a separate variable, even though it's the same intent, same thing. So tell us how the things are going this week. But in some semesters, the question was any other comments, concerns, suggestions. In others, it was please describe the experiences. And so we thought maybe the question itself may change the response. And so we kind of entered them in the database a little bit differently than, so that we know that it was a different question. One interesting thing that I did as an experiment just for fun, in some semesters, this question comes last in the survey. So after they did the peer evaluations, after they submitted the weekly deliverables and whatever other data we collect, the last question is, so any other comments, questions, concerns. And then in some other semesters, I put it first. So before we get into anything, it says essentially the same thing, tell us how the things are going this semester. So the length of the comment was something like 2.5 to 1. So it increased more than 2 times when it goes as the first question rather than the last question. So people still have the energy and they still can write it. So whereas if you put it last, by the time people get to that final comment, by that time, obviously it would be, they're tired and often do not leave any comments. And I also see that we had a few questions here also related to comments on the performance of the coaches. Again, usually we don't ask for qualitative description of how the coaches did, just, were you happy or not? But it looks like in some semesters we asked for that as well. And then I also see here a few people involved in the team charter research that we've done or have been doing for a while now. Already published a few papers based on that line of research, and there are a few in progress. So, and I just recalled that we also have the full text of the team charter itself, team contract. And again, usually it's a few pages of text where the team sort of, basically a team contract. Again, we haven't really analyzed them for qualitative research per se, but I see here Charles and Theo, so they're helping us to sort of quantify some of the aspects of the team charter, such as length, or maybe, attention to detail. So it's more not the actual content per se, but kind of description of the content in meta terms. So again, we may be using it for the team contract research to see if not only the presence of the team contract makes a difference, but perhaps also the actual agreement or the actual principles or whatever is in that charter. So that's the data, and that's the actual data file here. So nothing super special. So you have all the people, and over the years, it looks like 69,000 people have provided comments. We may have not had that in the first semesters, but it's pretty detailed. And then essentially the code book gets flipped 90 degrees. So the variable names are listed vertically here, but in the data file, it looks essentially, that's that axis flipped 90 degrees. And you can see here, comment at week 1, 10, 11. I think it's sorted here alphabetically, not numerically. So, and you can see these comments here, and you can go up and down, and you can, some students, as you see, provide no comments, others provide more detailed comments, and so that's it essentially. Now, there are a couple more things that I would like to show you so you know where we are sort of coming from. So one, for a long time, we wanted to do a series of research, of studies and qualitative research. And do we have the date here? So this was posted 2 years ago, more, almost 3 now, or 2.5. But this was a description of what we wanted to do at that time, although the actual idea is much, much older. And so at that time, we thought about maybe doing a series of studies that perhaps would look at things like, we would analyze the comments, and we would look at the differences, maybe, people from, let's call it collectivist cultures versus individualist cultures. Are they commenting, differently on what's going on in teams? Much research has said that maybe collectivists will be talking more about relationships, and maybe individualists will be talking more about the task, or maybe the focus of the discussion will be a little different. So we haven't really done this research, but there have been a few ideas around this kind of comparison of the types of comments by culture or by country. Another one we thought about doing was evolution over time. So are people talking about maybe, I don't know, personal relationships in the beginning, but maybe the task at the end, or maybe the types of concerns are changing over time, or what else, So a bunch of different ideas and suggestions of how things would be changing over time in terms of those comments. And then obviously we can go as far as, are any of these comments predictive of what happens next in the team? If today they're talking about topic X, does it mean that 2 weeks later the peer evaluations will go down or up? So things like that. Another study we thought about maybe winners versus losers. So the teams that did a good job, were the comments sort of in some way indicative of that or not? And so we can look at that as well. And then obviously there were suggestions to look maybe men versus women or things like that. Another thing that I would like to show you, so at some point I wanted to do some study here and sort of took charge and extended or extracted about 18,000 comments. And I think that was like a couple of years of data that I even classified in some way. So I hired a couple of graduate students and we read those comments. And so we recorded here, as you can see, the length of the comment. So the idea was that maybe the length itself is indicative of something. Maybe more diligent students leave more comments or something like that. And so that's the actual comments. So again, for 2018, as you see, some people, said something and some didn't say much. But then we coded them in terms of the length, in terms of the sort of tone of the message, positive, neutral, negative, in terms of the sort of theme, interpersonal issues, process-related issues, task or other, then the purpose of the comment, inform, complain, suggest, or ask a question, or the topic itself. So what was the topic? And so that's where we had the most problems, because we ended up with like so many topics, it was almost impossible to work with. Eventually, I condensed all of the topics to about 30 topics. And so it was a little bit more manageable. But so I even have 2 years of data coded along these, several simple dimensions. And another thing I've done, I had a couple of my graduate students doing some work. And so we looked at some of these trends. Like, for example, we looked at categories and topics. So as you can see, like 18% based on that analysis was all good. Everything's going fine. And then I don't know what, making progress, simply reporting, like some of the topics. And then we looked at some of the issues over time. Like, for example, everything's good. So in the beginning, not everything's good, then everything's good. And then towards the end, oh my God, we have problems. Or for example, instructions, and it's just some random stuff. I just, kind of was playing with the data. But again, so everything's clear. Then the last 2 weeks, oh, nothing's clear, the instructions are poor or something like that. And so we looked at some of these contingencies over time, and then literally just tried everything possible, how things are going. Like, for example, frustration. So when they mention, I'm frustrated, I don't know what's going on. So this is how it changes over time. So originally everything's good. Then by some point it gets, like more pronounced, and then it goes a little down. So again, I'm not sure how useful these data are, other than, just some initial tests or some initial explorations, but that's what we had. And so, yeah, I think I'm going to stop here. So that's a general overview, unless you have specific questions about the data.
Vaz, I think that data is interesting, at least from a standpoint that it creates some interesting research questions, or it's a starting point for deeper analysis into some detailed research questions. I had a few just by looking at it.
Yeah.
I will open up the floor for any questions. I have a few myself, if there are none. But
yeah, if I may say just one thing here. So we had a discussion while we were waiting for this meeting with David and Daria about the fact that we have several people, and in fact, I see some of you here, who are also involved in qualitative research, including using X-culture data. And so that sort of gives us a couple of comments related to the fact that there are multiple people either interested or already even doing something on that front. So one, we might want to coordinate a little closer. So I'm not sure how many teams will eventually be formed, but no matter what the number is, we probably want to do at least keep each other updated about what's going on, so that we don't end up writing the same paper at the same time by different people. Second, it's also very important to remember that there are many, probably dozens possible sort of topics for papers. Not, each topic may generate multiple papers. So there is definitely room for multiple teams, and as long as there is interest, I mean, we can have 2, 3, 5, maybe even 10 teams working independently and never overlapping. It would be important to coordinate again to make sure that we don't end up writing the same paper. But at the same time, there is definitely no concern about multiple teams, because there is enough data for more than one paper, and possibly even for more than one general research streams in broader terms. So therefore, yes, if you're interested, especially if you already started doing something, again, I'll be honest, in full disclosure, over the years we've had, I recall, at least 5, maybe even 6 or 7 attempts by different people, to take charge of this line of research. And somehow it didn't really go anywhere. Like either people, run out of energy, or maybe, I don't know, lack discipline, or maybe they were not finding what they were supposed to find and there was no point in pursuing it. But I've had a bunch of people who say, oh, I just either mastered this new software and I would like to use it, or I really wanted to do this research and I'm glad that you have the data. So I hope this time it will be different. I hope this time it will go beyond simply the initial excitement and interest, and we'll actually get some data out, some publications out of it. So let's see how this meeting goes, but I strongly encourage you, if you're interested, to sign up and then join either Daria's team or another team, or form your own as long as we coordinate and make sure that we know who's doing what and don't sort of do the same study in multiple teams, I think we should be fine.
Vas, I think it's very important to actually keep track of all the qualitative projects that are going on. So maybe it will be a good plan to start with just a list of qualitative studies that are being done already.
Yes, and so one important thing again here is, so those of you, so I know several people recently started doing something, and then some had started a long time ago. But so we have this page here. So if you go to the website, to xculture.org, and you go to for researchers, we have this link here, research projects. And this is the link of all formally sort of known and initiated projects that are currently in progress. So these are still unfinished projects. As you see, we have quite a few of them. It looks to me like about 50, 60 of them. And so let me check one more time here, qualitative. So it seems like only this one big, sort of the one that I described, is listed as qualitative. So if any of you are doing research, and by the way, that concerns not only qualitative research, any research. So if you started any research, make sure to send me, like a summary, like the one that I showed you here. So where you have like a page or 2 pages describing what you're doing. Essentially look at it as a patent. So if somebody, wants to do something and they're not sure if anyone's doing it, so they can find your description here, and then they will know that, oh, okay, somebody's working on this. Like, for example, let me open one randomly, gender roles. If I remember correctly, that would be probably Grishma and Justin, because we have several people. So yes, there is a quick description here, as you see. So there is some description of the studies, and this should be, so it contains the list of people. Yeah, Grishma is the lead here, and then we have a few other people involved here. And so this way, if somebody will come to me and say, I want to do a study on men versus women, I will say, why don't you go and take a look at what's already being done by this group of people here. And if it's something different that you want to do, send me your description. So we put it on the website. So you kind of claim your authorship, so people know that you're working on this, but also others will, either contact you to join your team, or maybe will adjust their research so that it's not the same thing. And so from what I see here, I don't have anyone else's, but I do recall at least several people. In fact, I see some of them here who expressed interest in working in this area. So if you haven't done so, please do send me like a 1-page description of what you do so we can add it to this list. And then also, yes, it would be easier that way to monitor and make sure that there are no overlaps. So.
And Vaz, I think it's important to note, though, that only you know what the progress is on some of these, because some of these studies have been listed there on that page for many years, and they just sit there. And I'm not being critical of individuals, but we could at least, if there's someone interested in pursuing a similar topic that's been sitting there for several years, they should go ahead and do it, as far as I think.
Yeah, again, it's not unique to qualitative research, but that's another sort of a point of I wanted to say pain, but maybe consideration. So it is true that some of these have been sitting here for years. And somewhere, if you go to the For Researchers collaboration principles, in our collaboration principles, we say that we sort of reserve the right to take over the study that has been dormant for too long. So like if somebody either has individually a brilliant idea, or maybe takes one of the ideas that has been floating around for a long time and kind of takes ownership of it. So somewhere here we say that, if you sign up but never finish the study, we kind of reserve the right to maybe at some point take it over and finish it. Like, for example, one study that comes to mind right away, we did a paper on proactive personality. We presented it at a conference, or maybe even 2 conferences. And we are talking about like 2013, maybe 14. Like we are talking about like 7 years ago. And then somehow it never got submitted to a journal. I think the lead author went into industry and lost interest. And there were a few other people. I think it even bounced among the co-authors a couple of times, like different people took charge, but it was never submitted to a journal, period. And that one was finished. I mean, it's not just the idea, it was literally a finished paper. And obviously it's a shame that we never acted on it, but then all the other studies take so much time that we never got to it. And many of these would be just a brilliant idea that didn't go anywhere. So people would simply, propose an idea and then just never act on it. And so, yes, ideally, if you're working on a study, not only give me the 1-page, description, but also include some form of a progress report that we add here. And so again, I opened one randomly, but for many of them, you will actually see a log of progress. I'm not sure if I will be lucky to have this one here. So it's some sort of study description, but yeah, sometimes the final few lines are current status. And so sometimes it literally says dormant, or sometimes it says, data analyzed, paper being written. But again, unless you tell me, I wouldn't know that. And so for some of the studies, I'm involved myself, or at least I frequently communicate with the co-authors. Like, for example, again, I see here a bunch of, faces, like, for example, David here. So we work on multiple studies. And so even if there is a study that's, not related, basically, I kind of have an idea what you're doing, even if I'm not involved in it. But others, we could have, people request the data, I prepared the data, and then I never hear again. And so let me show you one more thing that sort of, so you understand that it's not so simple when it comes to time. So there is another magic folder on my computer that is a source of great, both joy, but also pain for me. And that is the data requests. So every time when people come and say, I would like to do a study, so every time that involves several steps and several hours of work on my end. So they would say, I would like to do a study, and that means that we would probably meet a couple of times to discuss the possibility of that study. Do we have suitable data? Is anyone working on that study? Then we would normally have a meeting where we would go over the available data and together select the suitable variables. I'll just open one of them as an example. So select suitable variables and make sure that the person knows what those variables are. Sometimes, I need to explain that even though the name doesn't match, but that's actually the variable we need, and vice versa. Sometimes it looks like the name suggests that that's what you need, but in reality, that's not a variable that you need. And so usually it takes me at least 5 hours, by the time everything's clear and the data are transferred. And I opened here one paper because you only have initials and I know who the person is. So we started talking, it looks like at least 2018, maybe even earlier. I must have had like 5 or 6 or maybe even 7 meetings with this person. I prepared the data initially, and then I think I even collected data additionally because he needed the team member exchange data that we didn't have originally. So I had to measure it a different way. So this study cost me, I would say, at least 10, 12 hours already, and maybe even more. And it sort of pains me to see that it didn't go anywhere. Like it eventually just sort of died out. I don't know what the results were. Did it lead to anything? It just, a little bit, it takes time. I also had an interesting discussion, again, in full disclosure, with people from Cornell, and I had a discussion with people from Harvard earlier this year. And so they reached out to me and they said, I hear you have a bunch of data, could you share them with me? And so because I had some bad experience in the past where I spent like literally hundreds of hours on one project, where it was a collection of data, included experimentation. I had to design the surveys differently that semester. We had to have subgroups, people from Ivy League schools. They published 2 papers in FT50 journals and sent me an email. Oh, great news, we published 2 FT50 papers, thank you so much for your help. I'm like, what? Like, so you didn't list me as a co-author? Like, I helped you literally write responses to the reviewers. I was involved in many ways. And they said, oh, I didn't realize that you're interested in co-authorship. We thought at your school it's not required. I'm like, yeah, sure, I just do it for fun. I had nothing better to do. So with these guys, I told them up front that, if you need the data, it will cost a lot of time on my end. I mean, we will have the meetings, we will have, and so the Harvard people said, oh, we're not interested in co-authors. We thought basically have nothing better to do. You'll just prepare the data. And then Cornell people were more respectful and they said, oh, sure, yeah, it would be nice. But what I mean here is that, yes, please do inform us, when you start a study, do send that 1-pager. So we can add it to the paper, because otherwise, things can go wrong. People may not realize that you're doing a study, and we've never had those kinds of conflicts yet, but probably they will happen at some point. And so if you don't send that 1-pager, nobody knows. I may forget. As you see, there are literally dozens and dozens of studies going on. So we may set up ourselves for a kind of unpleasant surprise where you finish a study just to find out that somebody published it 2 months earlier. Second, if you have progress, if you are advancing to the next level, analyzing data, writing the draft, presenting a conference, do let me too. It takes me a few minutes to add that to the list, but again, everybody knows what's going on. And then third, if you see that it's not going anywhere, maybe the results are not what you expected, maybe you don't have the time anymore, maybe something else changed, maybe you no longer are interested in publishing, do let us know as well, and maybe we'll find someone who will take over that study and still publish it, and then still list you as the original author, at least in some form. But if you don't tell us, it may sit there and nobody may even remember about it. and we may not even know that it's not active anymore. And as David said, somebody can take it over, but we just don't act because we think you're still working on it. So yeah, kind of be sort of respectful of everybody's time, and information exchange is the key here to prevent problems.
Thus, can I?
Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
Interject. Hi, everyone. So good night, good evening, good afternoon, good morning. Change things around. I just first had a comment that I believe that some dissertations have been made based on qualitative data. I thought that should be mentioned. I think Laetitia
Dissertations in which sense?
Well, qualitative methods on X-culture data. I believe Laetitia M's dissertation was qualitative.
Oh, dissertations. Sorry, I thought you said dissertation.
Yeah.
Dissertation.
No, dissertation. So I thought I'd mention that since we're doing an overview of all research on. I think it's important not to exclude the people who are doing their PhDs on X-culture data too, if you want to have a comprehensive. And I have a few suggestions for research governance. So perhaps what we could do is form a small task group and come up with better ways to pilot everything. And I know I'm a bit of a culprit of that too, although I did send very recently an update to my page on SNA around X-culture data. So that's but I really wanted to remind everyone that we have some dissertations on qualitative data, and then the discussion went elsewhere. So I thought I'd pitch in and help everyone by offering to help define rules. I think a yearly update should be a minimum requirement, and probably more than a year might be too much to ask.
Yeah. Or as things happen, right? So dissertations, I'm so glad, Mark, that you brought up dissertations, because they are tricky in the sense that unlike a research project, regular one that allows for multiple co-authors, dissertations technically should be done by the student only. And so in many cases, we are almost, make it a point not to be too much involved, because otherwise the PhD student may be accused of not doing his or her original dissertation research alone. But that also promotes sort of losing track of what's being done. I got an email, by the way, yesterday, just added that to the list of publications on the same page, because we have the ongoing projects, but publications. So one of our students from New York just published a paper based on the dissertation. So I didn't know where it was, but yes, good to know that.
So there was a question in the chat about how can people be contacted on the page that I manage. My email is there, so anyone can contact me of course. I think that we should also put the conference proceedings or conference presentations, not just on every page, but have them also listed maybe on a separate page from the publications, so that people can observe what progress is being made on projects and tie it to the different streams listed on the research page. But let's take that offline maybe and focus on new qualitative projects today.
Yeah. So, but as a quick note, so what Mark was talking about, that when you go for researchers and click on publications, so here you would see the list of, again, papers that I've been informed about published. Some of them I'm involved in, so I knew obviously, but others would be like, for example, here you have a bunch of papers that we have co-authors, and you have here selected publications. So again, it's not a complete list, but those are the ones that I was told about. And so we can also add here publications, related, so dissertations, but we can also conference presentations. Again, I don't know about all of them, unfortunately, but if you present anything, as long as you send me the reference, it's easy for me to add it here. And then likewise, you can see who published what before if you're interested.
Oh, okay. It was already there. My mistake then. I thought it was just indexed.
It is already there. The only thing is that it's not even close to being a complete list. Publications, I'd like to believe that it's most of them, maybe 90%. Yeah. Conference presentations, definitely not even 10%. I bet there are many, many more that we never heard about.
I think Mark brought up one idea, Vaz, that we can talk offline about it on how it gets done, because it does involve actually a lot of follow-up work, but a once a year follow-up that we could actually have one of these meetings, one of the topics of the meeting once the XRIG meeting once a year could be a yearly update on the status of all projects, and what particularly ones that are dormant, to give an opportunity for people that, whether it's qualitative or quantitative or whatever, for people that want to pick that up, that it's not just sitting there and languishing in dormancy because someone had a good idea for a topic, but they didn't pursue it. Just coming up with an idea for a topic isn't research, as we all know.
Oh, ideas are easy.
Yeah. And then, but digging down deep into it and understanding the data, it, like for the few papers I've worked on, it was a learning curve to get into the data and to understand it and put together things, even though actually one of the papers I picked up was one that obviously someone had already put the measurements in there, and we figured out a way to put together a model for that. And there's a lot of opportunity there that people can build on, but I think we do need to update on dormant projects. And I think after it's done once, it'll be a lot easier to
maybe
do.
You know what, maybe let me go through all of them. So it's a lot of them, but it's not an unsurmountable task. So maybe let me create sort of a nice Excel catalog of all of the studies so that it's easy to select all, maybe send like a regular survey, so to speak, where's the project standing, and kind of a couple of clicks, because if everybody will be given a chance to speak, we just will not have enough time. But maybe a quick, like a couple of question survey, what's the status, who's involved. So that should be relatively easy to do.
I think we should set up a low maintenance system.
Yeah. Maybe even self-report.
I'm not even sure we need an annual XRIG meeting on this. Just we need simply a commitment from project leaders to update every year. And
but by the way, if anyone wants to take a lead on the administrative side, so we have David who's managing the XRIG, we have Justin who's managing the hackathon. So we have Lonju who's doing a lot of data preparation. Justin helps with that too, but maybe if somebody wants to be the administrator, so basically the archivarius, I guess is the name, right? Keeping track of all of the, developments and publications and projects. And maybe
one thing very simple to do is add in the list page when that page was last updated, and then visually we know immediately which who to contact and say, okay, we haven't heard from you in 3 years. What's going on?
And I think, Vaz, we'll talk about it offline. I don't want to create more work for you.
That's a whole separate question. So let's get back to qualitative research. You're right.
Yeah, but I don't want to create more work for you. You've got plenty of work, but we can take it offline.
That's why I said if anybody wants to sign up to lead that.
Bruce Kibler says he has to go to another meeting, but he has a question here or a statement. He'd like to analyze national composition of teams and its correlation to overall team performance as measured against final evaluation by professors. Bruce, if you're still there, that to me sounds like a pretty extensive multi-method study. It sounds interesting, but I think, Vaz, you can speak to that. I think the data is there. It's an extensive study.
Yeah, the important thing is that we do have the data. So we have the performance data, we have the nationality data. So as long as there is interest, so we can definitely look at the composition. Yeah.
So I guess I'm not sure Bruce is still here, but my question to Bruce would be probably your same question is, does he need research partners for that he wants someone to do the data analysis, or is he doing that? It's a good idea, but delving into that data is a big not a challenge, but it's a big undertaking, I think.
Well, first we have to make certain no one's already started on this.
We've had a bunch of studies that looked at diversity of the team, but not so much at the composition of the specific, countries. So therefore it shouldn't.
Okay. I mean, I don't know as well as you do every project ongoing.
Yeah, and that's another thing. So it's sort of important to have maybe 1 or 2 people who are kind of involved in this all the time, because much of that is not fully codified. So it's important to to have someone who kind of knows. But ideally, we want to create a system where it's somehow automatically logged, and anyone has access to that information, and there is no need for a specific person to remember everything.
Okay, so I have a question for this group, everyone. I mean, we've got 44 people here, still here. Who in this group at the moment has an active qualitative study going on? And what is the topic? Or do they need authors? Or we can use this as a co-author call if people want that. But we do need to kind of know who actually has a qualitative study that's active.
I can start. I'm actually doing the study, and I apologize, I didn't tell anyone because I'm not using X-Culture data, but it's based on X-Culture. So I am interested in global mindset, and global mindset has several components, and my theory is that different experiential learning opportunities offer kind of students chances to develop different parts of the mindset. So I am making my students write an essay at the end of the X-Culture project. And I try to kind of analyze it in terms of what elements of global mindset the students mention. And then I also do a lot of study abroad. So I compare the X-Culture to actual in-country experiences students are having. So I'm doing it by myself and it takes forever, but if anyone wants to join, I would be very happy to share.
David,
it's an interesting topic. Go ahead, Vas. Sorry.
David, I found my own records of people who at some point expressed interest in doing research. So obviously Daria here, also very recently, like literally within the last few weeks, Christine Asensio, I think that's how you pronounce the last name. So again, the idea there was that it would be an exploratory study with no specific topic in mind quite yet. Then Jennifer Lee, as you remember, so in Chicago, must have been like 3-4 years ago. She wanted to subject the data to some analysis, but again, with the goal of just simply exploratory, no specific topic in mind, we'll see where it leads us. And then also there was someone from Germany called, the name was Tina Davidson. Same thing, there was some sort of a software that apparently does it. And so she also thought about doing some exploratory work first and see what emerges, but there was no specific topic. And so Mark, I believe you also at some point talked about some exploratory work. But again, there was no specific topic in mind, if I remember.
Yes, well, yes. I mean, but as you know, Vas, but probably not everyone else here does. My specific approach is social network analysis. I'm looking at peer ties, and right now we're focusing on quantitative measures first. But down the road, we might look at emotions when assessing peers and so on. But nothing's on the table yet. The only thing I would say is that right now, we're collecting data on energy sparks. And in order to understand within that particular survey, which Michael, who is still here, I think, is leading that particular effort, we might probably delve into how comments might express some of the things going on in terms of energy flows between peers. Yeah. But clearly, it's a mixed method, but driven by the peer network structure first. So we're not going to step on anyone's shoes going full qualitative at the individual level. Or the other thing I wanted to add is that I've rated IB reports in X-Culture. All of us have, I guess. There's comments there too that are potentially a mine of information, and that there we could also draw some research questions from the input from the assessors of the reports after the exercise is over. And I'm out.
Yeah, David, I also have had maybe 7 or 8 undergraduate students who have written sort of, honors projects for like very relatively primitive stuff in terms of the methods, but they essentially just read the comments and then wrote some papers based on what they read. But there were no specific discoveries. It was more like I read the comments from 100 teams, and this is what's going on in those teams. So I don't think they would be publishable or pursued in any way further. So it was just undergraduate sort of term paper.
Well, I can say from my perspective, at least, I'm at the infancy, but I already have two other potential co-authors on this, so we might need one more that could add something. But I'm looking at doing something into perceptions of coaching. So virtual international coaching and student perceptions, that's one that I'm looking at pursuing. I believe Karen has been involved in some of that, or I initially talked to Karen about it. I don't want to step on her toes if that's what she's doing.
I don't think qualitative is the main focus of Karen's work at this time, but she may have been doing something in that area.
I'll talk to her. I've already opened up a line of conversation there, and I'm happy to. I've told her, she's one of the potential co-authors if she wants to be.
I also see Drew is here. So Drew is managing all kinds of work related to the coaching program. And so we're doing some work with him related to a quantitative work, but he may also be have access to some qualitative comments left either by coaches or for coaches. And so if anyone wants to do something, Drew here, so Drew, he is a PhD student at this time. And for many years, he's been managing all kinds of aspects of the coaching program. So he's the one usually managing all those weekly feedback and evaluations. So he's basically like a top manager in that team. And so much of the correspondence and materials and surveys and case reports and things like that kind of go through him and accumulate on his hard drive.
Say hi, Drew.
Drew, I'd like to talk to you at some point.
Yeah.
To
can have Drew, a conversation later on.
Yeah. So, those are good things to know for everybody. I mean, it's in its infancy, but does anybody else have any questions?
Let me ask a question.
In the chat box.
So, go ahead, Hafsa.
Hafsa?
Yeah. So, since you are talking about coaching, I thought that there is correspondence between coaches that are selected by students who have difficulties, who have harassment problems. And so I know it's new, but is there any correspondence that could be used in qualitative research in that direction? Either professors or former participants. So that was my question. Yeah.
I guess my quick answer would be that it's possible. The only problem when it comes to any correspondence, so not collected through the survey, but either email correspondence or some other form, so that it would not be comprehensive. So when we talk about the the weekly comments, so that's part of the survey and everybody does it and it's accumulated, and so every single comment is saved. So when it comes to anything that goes either through email or in personal correspondence with the professor or the coach, so it exists sort of in multiple places, and we can still collect hundreds of pages of that kind of text, but it will not include everything. And so I'm not sure if the research will require that you have everything, but if so, then yes, we wouldn't have the full collection. But if it's enough just to have some representative comments, then yes, we can definitely get a lot of stuff from coaches, from professors, from the correspondence among the team members. So if that's enough, then yes, we can get that.
Thank you.
Well, let me, David, maybe ask everyone a question. So we talked about several specific studies that we've had in mind. So for example, comments of men versus women. Is it true that women talk more about relationships and men talk more about the task, for example? Or as we discussed, changing topics or comments or themes over time. So is it true that teams talk about something in the beginning of the project, but something different in the middle and something else different at the end? So in terms of maybe positive or negative, or maybe the topic of the conversation, or maybe the purpose of the comments. Likewise, cultural differences. So is it true that, collectivists versus individualists, or power distance, or, whatever the other dimension we want to look at? Are there any differences in the comments? And then more importantly, or as an extension of that, so do any of those predict performance? So are there any correlations among the types of topics, for example, discussed in the comments, and then team performance or quality of the work they do, or maybe conflicts they have, or satisfaction? And can comments be used to predict maybe problems early on and then intervene? So these are some of the kind of obvious low-hanging fruits. And so my question is, is anyone interested in doing that kind of research? And so obviously, Daria, I'm not sure, maybe that's exactly what you plan to do. But if you either don't have a specific topic or your specific topic is different, then would anyone want to step forward and maybe take one of these studies and say, okay, I want to study, women versus men comments. Are there really a difference or something like that? So is anyone interested here?
Vas, I think we need to send a doodle poll or something, because we can have certain interesting questions, and some of them actually are in the comments. So we can list different options and see how many people will be interested. I was also thinking that we probably need to ask everyone as to their experience with different software products, because, it would be nice to have someone who knows what they're doing when it comes to NVivo or Qualtrics or whatever. So I guess my question to everyone would be, do we have experts on qualitative data analysis?
So we don't have to code them manually, because that would be very difficult.
Well, yes,
Actually, I have the experience of Atlas DI, this is like NVivo. And I did my master's thesis on that particular software, and I analyzed like 260 hours of interviews, and coded them and created some quotations and created those linkage diagrams out of that particular software. It was pretty cool, and I would love to bring them that kind of experience.
Well, given that you are managing all the mentorship thing, do you think you will have time to do this?
It's something like my main area is research. I am also participating in the hackathon, so I think this will be beneficial for me at the same time.
Okay.
Yeah.
I see also.
So to answer your question, Daria, about a year ago, I had 4 PhD students in the program here look at several qualitative analysis software, and they ended up saying that MaxQDA seemed the best fit to their purpose. Now, none of these are working on Xculture data today, but that means that perhaps what we should do is either go with someone who already masters one of these tools, because this is a bit like programming languages. There are religions sometimes about which one is the best one, or we can have a small task force interested do a comparative study for us, given that our source is Xculture data. That's something we can also do in the background. And the other thing I wanted to say is that we have to make sure we don't create too much of a bureaucracy. I think the role that Xculture essentially should have is less like a head of innovation or research inside an organization and more like a VC. So let some people try things out with a low maintenance relationship. And if something fails, well, learn from that and move on.
Yes, the best process would be, you tell us, I would like to do a study. Let's say, for example, I would like to compare comments of men versus women.
Yeah.
There is a theory that, women and men talk about different things. I send you the data. You send me one-page description so I can add it to them.
But
and then you
basically,
work autonomously, and then, like 3 months later, you say data analysis finished, have some interesting results. Another month later, you say, here is the draft of the paper. Another month later, I presented it at the conference. And then another half a year later, you say, and it's been published in JAP, here is a copy added to your catalog.
That's a very good timeline for a quantitative paper, Vas. But when we do qualitative research, we have to understand that sometimes it can take 8 years between the initial idea and the data collection, the analysis, going back and so forth and so on. So we can't use the same rhythm for qualitative research, but we should have at least yearly updates from everyone who took your time. And you're not funding with money as a VC here. You're funding with data access, and of course, with the idea sharing and the code books and so on and so forth. So that's why I thought the VC model fit better or thriving innovation here, even though we're not making money, we're making knowledge.
And I think it's fair to say here that and Vaz, tell me if I'm wrong, people should not use, whether it's quantitative or qualitative data analysis people that volunteer maybe to do some things, people should not use them for fishing expeditions. To just say, I have this idea, can you go do all of this analysis, when they really don't have a whole lot to support it, or maybe theory. And maybe I'm being a little hard there, but I have a feeling that's been done a lot in the past.
David, yeah, I guess I need to sort of explain what you mean because many people may not understand.
Right. A fishing expedition is idiomatic, but yeah, go ahead.
Right. But in quantitative papers, especially, so we have several people who are sort of data analysis experts. Justin Kramer, Lonju Dong, so there are a few people. And so often they join a project sort of with the deal that they will do the analysis, and then whoever came up with the idea will do most of the writing, and then obviously they polish it together and something comes out of it. And so what often happens is a person comes to, for example, Justin or Lonju or somebody else, we've had several other people involved in that role, and say, I have an idea, I think I would like to look at whether, you know, this and this correlates. And then so Justin runs a bunch of analysis and he says, oh, can you maybe add, you know, some mediators, moderators, or can you maybe look at it by country? So he runs it again. And so before you know it, Justin has spent now dozens of hours running those analyses, preparing the data, adding variables, relabeling them. I mean, it always involves a lot of time. And then the original person either at some point loses interest or says, oh, these not quite the results that I expected, or start writing and then never finishes or doesn't have the qualification. Or as David said, just goes on a fishing expedition and says, can you look at gender roles? And, you know, like do these 200 different tests. And then so Justin runs it and runs it and runs it. And then in the end, nothing happens. And so, yeah, so be sort of mindful if you ask someone to do the analysis for you, that's perfectly fine. We have a lot of people who can do it very high quality. But remember that, you know, time that they spend on doing the analysis for you, they kind of expect, you know, we all live in a publisher perish world, so to speak. So therefore, you know, if you have a specific idea and you're willing to work towards a publication, yes, obviously that would be a necessary step. But if you're simply sort of generally interested and, you know, don't know if you are interested at all, you kind of want to look at it something and see what happens, then probably not a good idea to waste somebody several days of work.
I second David's comment, and clearly there's a part of data mining that can be fishing expedition, but we're sharing common data, so we should always have a theory-driven approach to accessing data here. And I think this is more of a risk with quantitative studies and qualitative studies, honestly, because I've never seen a qualitative study that went on a fishing expedition to keep in, because that, I mean, there's always a literature review before you go to the field.
Well, but also by design, a qualitative study is exploratory, so it is somewhat of a fishing expedition. So it's not a bad thing.
But there's always a research question that structures whatever if it's whether it's semi-structured interviews or
but actually, Mark,
non-participating observation. There's always a research question first before you go into a field. It doesn't always reap results, but that's research. You know, it should be surprising.
Mark, actually, you know, when I look at my undergraduate students, again, what they produce is not even close to being publishable. But what's interesting that in all cases, it was a fishing expedition. In all cases, they had no theory, they don't know how to do it. And I tell them, hey, why don't you just read comments from these 100 teams and then see what comes up, you know, like what you come up with. And like amazingly, pretty much every time it's a whole different topic. Like one of my students did something on bullying. So somehow she found some comments there on bullying and you know, harassment. And she talked about it, you know, in the paper. Another one found something related to feedback. Another one, something related to coaching. Another one, again, men versus women. And so in all of the cases, they didn't have any idea what they will find. They just said, you know, I'll read the comments from one semester and then see what emerges. So therefore, I think there is room for that, especially, if people look at existing comments and not preparing, structured interviews. So when you look at the existing comments, it may not be a bad idea to actually read something and see what kind of, themes emerge and if it can be turned into a paper. So I think that may be that may be a perfectly viable way forward for us. But then once you start, seeing some specific picture that you would like to focus on, I guess maybe at that time clarify it so that we can add it.
Yeah. I mean, but that's, I would say that's not. I mean, okay.
Not good research.
The way I understand fishing expedition is like the hunting of the snark, where you go out. It's deep sea fishing, so it requires a lot of effort, and you don't have a roadmap to start with. It's just a blank rectangle. I don't know if you know this short story by Lewis Carroll, but if you don't read it, you'll enjoy it.
Well, okay. Sorry, Mark, wait, go ahead.
I was done.
We're approaching 11:05, so we're an hour and 5 minutes in. I do want to, before we end, I want to go through quickly the chat comments and try to answer the questions of anyone who put comments in there. Nora, Jay, as far as signing up, Vaz, maybe we'll talk offline about that. In the past, it's basically been to contact you, as I understand it, and find out who's working on what. And you're the library of information there, and that's great. But at some point, it becomes overwhelming for you, I think.
Yeah. And by the way, so let's say Daria here, or you, David, or anyone else, if you would like to sort of take a role of leading the qualitative research stream, not the topic itself, so maybe somebody can be a coordinator specifically for this line of research. And so it doesn't have to be, me, or, it could be a person who specifically tries to keep track of all qualitative research developments. So therefore, yeah, I guess maybe if you have some ideas and suggestions, perhaps, I don't know, Daria, can we appoint you to be sort of a...
Yes, I can do that.
And then, if anyone else comes to me, or these 5 or 6 names that I already listed, maybe I'll actually send an email and copy you and ask, so what's new, what's going on, because we have a whole stream going on here. So Daria would be sort of the coordinator. So why don't you guys check? So if you're no longer working on that, no problem, no reply necessary, or just let us know. But if you're still working, then yes, maybe you should. And maybe we could have even a meeting like this specifically, just among the people involved in the project, and then, decide either join forces or clarify who does what and make sure that it's not overlapping. So Daria, congratulations. You're now in charge of keeping track of all these qualitative research developments. So.
Okay, and then that's great. And then share ongoing research. We did that, put a date. We talked about that, and we'll try to follow up on that to find out which projects are dormant versus ones that are active, particularly in qualitative, but also quantitative too at some point. Vaz, and Sujin Yun asks, is it possible to contact the researcher who's in charge of the specific research project and ask to join the group? In the past, Vaz, you've helped me do that. You just gave me the name of whoever it was, and I emailed them, and I went from there.
Yeah, and so that list of ongoing publications, normally there is a list of people who are responsible with the contacts. You can reach out to them, but usually sort of we have 2 modes or 2 possible outcomes. So one, if you have an idea for something that already is being done by someone else, so sort of 2 possible paths forward. One, either you change your topic enough so that it's a distinct study and you just do something slightly different, so different enough that it would warrant 2 separate publications, or the 2 teams join forces. And even if somebody is already working on it, especially if it's an older study, usually they would be very, very happy to join them and say, I would like to help. Because in many cases, it's been sitting like the one that I showed you, it's been sitting there for a couple of years now. Chances are the person will never finish it on his or her own. So if you come and say, I can help you, maybe I can even take a leading role, I think it will be appreciated. So they will say, oh, great, good to hear it, because otherwise I'm kind of not able to finish it on my own. So therefore, yeah, no problem, contact, and then either, decide that you will work together or decide that you will work on slightly different topics. But, and I can help you if the name is not listed there, let me know, I'll find who the responsible person is and what the contacts are.
We have a student, a PhD student here, Paolo Cunico. He has a question it's not necessarily related to qualitative, but could it be interesting to investigate the relationship between conflicts within groups and final group result in order to see whether conflicts may lead to a positive result? Vaz, I'm gonna let you speak to that.
This one's tricky. We've had like 5 publications on conflicts.
Yeah.
We submitted literally 1 today, like literally today. So we need to take a closer look at what you have in mind, because conflicts in general, it's not a new topic. So we've done a lot of work, but at the same time, I'm sure there is still room for many more studies on conflicts. And so
I would say my feedback would be the same, and you know more than me about all the papers, Vaz, but there's plenty of room in the conflict theory and other things that if you dig that question deeper, Paolo, I'm sure there's area for you to investigate within conflicts, but that topic needs to be delimited a bit.
Yeah.
I would
just
say.
search for studies with the title topic on that page that I showed. You'll find several there, and it's not up to date in terms of the recent publications and submissions, but I can give you more information. So definitely a very promising line of research, but not entirely new. And when you simply say conflicts and performance, that's almost like not a study. It's like a career almost. So it would need to be sort of narrowed down, because there is much more going on than just simply conflicts and performance.
And as an example of that would be holding 2 conflicting thoughts in your head at the same time in an X-Culture project.
Yeah.
Well, that would be interesting.
Yeah, conflicts, for example, came up in that research on team contract. So what we found was that when there is a team contract, so in the experimental condition where we had the team contract, there were more conflicts. So it seems like people would be less accepting of deviations from what's agreed upon. And so there would be more conflicts. So in a way that came up as well. And then as a result, some of the outcomes actually were hurt by those additional conflicts. So whereas when there was no contract, people were a little bit more flexible, and so didn't start fighting each time something was not exactly as agreed in the document. But yes, in general, that's a very interesting topic, and we can talk about it definitely.
It's not a problem for yin-yang thinkers.
Right.
Could be also cultural differences, which we didn't look at. So maybe that's where it should be looked at. Or maybe type of conflict. So we measure interpersonal process and task. And so maybe some of them are good and some of them are bad. Maybe some are constructive and others are destructive. So, yeah.
Okay, so Stephen Crawford, I think Vaz, he asked that he senses that the current discussion focuses on aggregated data collected by X-Culture organizers. That's generally true, Stephen. It's aggregated data that's collected through the surveys and through open-ended qualitative questions. So that should answer your question.
Although, David, I can add to that. So 1, we do have already lots of data, and you can use the aggregated existing data. 2, we've had a lot of studies where we collected additional data. And so we can do that either in the next round, if you have some interesting idea, or for example, for that study on free riders, qualitative study that I was involved that we published. So we went back in time and contacted free riders like a year later and said, remember when you participated in X-Culture, you were excluded from the team. We would like to interview you about that. And out of 117 people, 87 agreed to be interviewed. And so that was like, post hoc, going back in time. So again, if you have some ideas that do require that, we can possibly even reach out to some of the former participants and get that information. So therefore, yes, we have the data, and that's the main focus. What do we do with the data? But if you need something different, it may be possible to arrange for that as well.
I think, and we've got a lot of questions here about very specific data questions that I would suggest we save for another meeting. Yeah. That we can have one meeting where we announce, okay, if you have specific questions about the data and what's available, this meeting will be for that. And Vaz, you could basically off the top of your head say either that data is available or it isn't.
So usually Fridays are good if we want to have a meeting like that. Yeah. I also see, David, that many comments are about studies not related to qualitative research.
Correct.
So same process. So maybe send me an email, and then either I will sit down with you and prepare the data so you can work on the study, or I will connect you with someone who can do the analysis for you if you're not much of a methods person, but more of a writer. So we can do that. Or I will connect you with like Lonju or Justin, who can then prepare the data for you. So not me, but someone else. So probably the first step would be send me an email that you want to do it, and then we'll connect you with the
Go from there.
necessary resources and people so that you can start that study. And as David said, so sort of be cognizant here. So kind of do that only if you are seriously determined to get something published. Because once you place that request, it will, require a lot of time cumulatively from me or whoever else will be assisting you. And so if it just simply, let's take a look just for fun, probably not a very, sort of ethical way to go about it. But if you're seriously interested in being, in publishing it and you're willing to invest the necessary time, by all means, that's what we do. So we all are interested in getting those publications out. So we'll help in any way possible. And there is no problem if you want to be a solo author. So just because I prepare the data for you or somebody else helps you in some other way, doesn't necessarily mean that everybody needs to be listed as co-author, as long as you're willing to do pretty much all of the work on your own other than getting the data. So, but at the same time, it's not a bad idea to have co-authors, because again, some of these people know the data, others know the methods, others are excellent writers, others are, like for example, David here, just as an example, I highly recommend him as a co-author. We've written a bunch of papers. He is good at coordinating stuff. He is good with theory, with writing. And so, if you want to work alone or work with David, I recommend working with David. It will improve the quality of the outcome. It will improve the process. He has a record of getting things published. So why would you want to work alone? But then again, some people do prefer to work alone, and that's perfectly fine. Simply because you use our data does not entitle me or anyone else to be a co-author. So that's not a problem at all.
Okay.
Well, many universities have adhered to the COPE principles, which specify who's eligible to be a co-author or not. We can explicitly put that in our research rules of community, if you like.
I would say, it depends on time investment. So if it's something that we just sat down for an hour, I sent you the data, never heard back until you get it published, definitely, like, I wouldn't feel that, that I deserve to be listed as a co-author. At the same time, if it was a lot of meetings, if it was, some idea exchange, help with writing, whoever that was, David, Mark, Daria, I, whoever else, probably it would be, ethical to list those people as co-authors, maybe, towards the end, depending on how many are involved. But, sort of remember that we all live in a publish-or-perish world, but nobody should be getting a free ride. And from my experience, nobody ever tries to get a free ride. We've had people who signed up to work on a project, didn't make a contribution, and they were the first ones who then came back and said, you know what, I don't think I should be listed as a co-author, so I didn't really make a contribution. So it happens all the time. So people seem to be pretty ethical. So no problem at all.
All right, we have time for one more. Teet, you have a question or your hand up?
Hello. Actually, I also wrote it in chat. It's a question about such research direction that I don't understand quite how, in which way really best ideas are digged out from reports for companies. And if we can have such an information, that opens actually a completely new direction where we can compare assessment by us, feedback from enterprises, and types of teams which get positive or less positive feedback from companies. But you understand, my question is based on different types of projects where I also work with teams which get exact feedback from enterprises for which they do the projects in some other frameworks.
This is a very, very big and important and interesting question. Again, a good example of a study that required a lot of time and didn't go anywhere. So about maybe 6 years ago, we started this big research, and you can find it on the list of ongoing studies. So we wanted to look comprehensively at how reports are being evaluated and used. And so we looked at differences in evaluations by, junior professors versus senior professors, professors from the United States versus China, coaches versus professors, practitioners versus professors. So we spent a lot of time, had many meetings, identified something like 8 different evaluation styles, from strict to lenient, from differentiates a lot from one report to another versus gives everyone the same grade, to differentiates a lot from one dimension to another versus if I like the report, I give everything, high grade, and vice versa. And then somehow, again, it didn't go anywhere. So we spent dozens and dozens of hours each. And so, yeah, so it's a great idea. We already started working on that years ago, and then it just didn't go anywhere, sort of other projects to cover. So if you would like to take a closer look at it, Teet, I can send you an update on what we already have.
Please, can you send, because you see why I asked this question, in some other project where frameworks, really part of the learning is to understand what is the benefit for a company from the project. But understand in our case, for some companies, for Italian wine producer, maybe there are 60 teams, and I guess they don't read all the reports, but there should be some system to dig out the best ideas for the enterprise.
Yeah, no, that's
Okay.
exactly the point. Yeah. So, yes. So I can send you a
Okay.
little bit more information. So there are
Yeah.
a couple of
Okay.
projects of that kind,
Excellent.
and both of them are sort of open for grabs. So we started working, we had some good ideas, good foundation, and then sort of ran out of steam and switched to other things. And so maybe we can revitalize them and get them published finally.
Well, I think with that, we're going to go ahead and conclude the meeting. If anyone has any questions, you can feel free to email me or Vaz, or in the case Daria has agreed, kindly agreed to coordinate qualitative researchers. So Daria, if you don't mind taking that on, that would be a big help.
Yep.
With that, Daria, thank you for your contribution. Vaz, as always, everybody, this has been another good meeting. I think we had over 50 people at one point, so we've been averaging that, which is a good number. So let's keep this going. I look for in the next couple of months. Right now, we're kind of trending on a quarterly basis of doing these. Personally, I think doing it monthly may reduce the participation a bit. So quarterly is actually working out pretty well. But if someone has feedback about that, please feel free to send it to me. Yeah.
And I truly hope that many of you will contact Daria about doing research either jointly or as a separate team, because qualitative data are rich data. We have literally hundreds of thousands of pages by now of data. And so we haven't really used them. So it seems to me like there are so many good papers hidden in those data. So please do maybe take a lead and see what you can do here.
Vas, David, and Daria, thank you for your leadership in this.
Thank you, everyone. Yes.
Thank you.
David,
Thank you. And
do you have a topic for next time?
The next,
Anyone wants to
well,
volunteer
not
for the
yet.
next time?
What's
I can
that?
do SNA if you like.
A survey?
No, social network analysis, if you like.
Okay, let's talk offline about that, because
Okay.
yeah, I'm always looking for new topics. Anything that would be interesting. So yeah, let's talk offline, and
There's
we'll
a there's a
one way or
video
another.
that should be on the X-Culture website
Yeah,
soon.
yeah.
We can
So
schedule
I
in
can
for
follow
one
up.
meeting.
I can follow up on after people have watched the video of opportunities to find new insights.
Just email
Okay.
me. We'll get you on the schedule. Yeah.
And
Thanks,
thank you
David.
so much. I got 2 one-page study descriptions while this meeting was on from people. So good outcome already. So, and I didn't know about either of those studies. So it's very good. Thank you. You know who you are for sending the emails. So thank you. Yeah, I'll add them to the collection right away. All right. Thank you, everyone.
See you next time.
thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.